details of Saudi Arabia's shocking plan to divide the Holy Land. Michael Snyder reports, one of the most important international agreements in modern history is being secretly negotiated behind the scenes, and once it is publicly announced, it could fundamentally change the geography of the Middle East. I wrote about this last week, but I have learned more since that time. As part of a blockbuster deal to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, the Saudis want to achieve some sort of a diplomatic breakthrough for the Palestinians, and that would not be an independent Palestinian state because Benjamin Netanyahu would never accept such an outcome. But the Saudis have floated another plan that might be acceptable to Netanyahu's government, and it would result in a historic division of the Holy Land. As I discussed the other day, the United States is the mediator for these negotiations, and it is being reported that the Biden administration wants to get an agreement finalized before the end of the first quarter of next year. Joe Biden is quite concerned about his legacy, and he knows that there is no guarantee that he will win in 2024. The Saudis are also quite motivated to get a deal done because they realize that a deal may not be possible once a Republican enters the White House. So the clock is ticking, and even though the major elements of potential normalization agreement have been hashed out, we're being told there is still much work to be done. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Thursday that the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia have a general idea of the major elements of a potential normalization agreement between Jerusalem and Riyadh, but there is still much more work to do before a deal can be signed. Many of the elements of a pathway to normalization are now on the table. We don't have a framework. We don't have the terms ready to be signed. There is still work to do, Sullivan told reporters aboard Air Force One as U.S. President Joe Biden made his way to India in order to attend the Group of 20 summit in New Delhi this weekend. So that makes it sound like negotiations are fairly advanced at this stage. And according to Axios, the Biden administration has made it abundantly clear to the Israelis that there will be no agreement at all unless they are willing, quote, to make significant concessions to the Palestinians, end quote. The Biden administration told the Israeli government last week that it would have to make significant concessions to the Palestinians as part of any possible mega deal with Saudi Arabia that includes normalization between the Kingdom and Israel. 4 U.S. officials and a source briefed on the issue told Axios. So what would significant concessions look like? We know that there will be no independent Palestinian state while Netanyahu is in charge, but would Netanyahu support merging the Palestinians into the nation of Jordan? Supposedly, this is a plan that is favored by the Saudis. On June 8, 2022, an article that was authorized by a very close confidant of Mohammed bin Salman named Salih Shihabi set forth the details of this plan. And according to Shihabi, this new entity would include present-day Jordan, Gaza, and the West Bank. This proposed enlarged kingdom would include present-day Jordan, Gaza, and the West Bank, areas populated by Palestinians, attached in a contiguous manner and physically connected to Jordan, hence not broken up into islands. Israeli arguments as to the need to retain the Jordan Valley becomes moot since the valley will now be controlled by the Jordanian government with a reliable record of maintaining peace with Israel. The convenient argument that Israel has no peace partner will now also be eliminated. Shihabi seems to think that Israel would agree to this if the Palestinians were to relinquish all claims to the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, despite the fact that neither Arabs nor Muslims have a hope of dislodging Israel from it, is given its symbolism a key bargaining chip in Palestinian hands. The formal relinquishment of any claims to Jerusalem with an appropriate arrangement for the holy places can be an important concession used to secure the foregoing terms. The Palestinians, after all, are the only party who can do this and hence completely legitimize Israel in the eyes of the region and the world. And Shihabi also envisaged a democratic vote in which the agreement would be ratified by both the Jordanians and the Palestinians. Such a deal would need to be ratified by some form of collective decision of the Jordanians and the Palestinians, defined here as those who are residents of the occupied territories and those that are stateless in the diaspora. Anybody with no skin in the game has no business deciding here, and this means other Arabs or Muslims or even Palestinians who are comfortably settled in other countries with full citizenship. While rejectionists, quote unquote, will likely resort to violence, the fight to crush these groups will be immeasurably strengthened by the support of the Palestinian masses, who will have voted in favor of the solution. Should the Palestinians vote against the solution, then they would have collectively agreed, at best, to continue to bear the heavy burden of occupation and statelessness with all its consequences for the indefinite future. Interestingly, this framework has also been discussed by the Israelis in recent months. In fact, it was floated in an editorial that was published in the Times of Israel on June 4th of this year. Gaza and the West Bank should be demilitarized and reincorporated as part of Jordan, perhaps the West Bank first and Gaza sometime later. In that editorial, the article that Ali Shibahi wrote, in which this plan was originally proposed, was specifically referenced. As suggested elsewhere, Jordan will change its name to reflect this territorial union. The name will be Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine, has lately been suggested in an article published in the Saudi royal family-owned news outlet Al Arabiya News last June 8, 2022, and an internationally recognized border between Israel and the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine will be established to recognize the new reality. That does not mean that this is what is going to happen. During the course of negotiations, so many things can change. So we'll have to wait and see what the final results of the negotiations will be. The same editorial that I just mentioned above also calls for an international aid program that will be similar to the Marshall Plan. An international aid program similar to the Marshall Plan for Europe after World War II should be established as part of the solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict to develop the economy of Jordan and integrate the Palestinians in this expanded Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine. A big enough pile of money could go a long way towards convincing the Palestinian people to accept such a deal, and we do know that the Palestinians and the Jordanians have already been developing much closer ties. Here's just one example. The Minister of Justice Ahmad al-Ziyadat, representing the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and his Palestinian counterpart Mohammed al-Salalhdeh, represented the State of Palestine, signed a memorandum of understanding in the field of legal cooperation between the two countries. The signing took place in the presence of the Secretary General of Judicial Affairs, Judge Saad al-Luzi, the Secretary General of Administrative and Financial Affairs, Khalud al-Abadi, and several directors of the ministry's departments. The memorandum included various areas of cooperation, including the exchange of experiences in legal regulations and legislation, providing training opportunities for legal experts and researchers, sharing experiences regarding alternatives to imprisonment and detention, automation and digitization of procedures, human rights, and facilitating access to justice. Ultimately, it would not be much of a stretch for the Palestinians to consider themselves citizens of Jordan. Before the war in 1967, those that lived in the West Bank were Jordanian citizens. And once again, I must stress that we do not know if any of this will actually happen, but negotiations are happening behind the scenes at a furious pace. Just last week, Palestinian authorities were supposed to talk with both Saudi officials and U.S. officials. Officials from Palestinian Authority PA held talks in Riyadh with Saudi counterparts on Wednesday. They were also due to see U.S. officials. If all of the parties can agree to a deal, I would expect it would be announced during the first half of 2024. Of course, 2024 is already shaping up to be a historic year for so many other reasons. The Saudi plan to divide the Holy Land may be part of the final deal, or it may end up on the cutting room floor. But if this normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel does divide up the Holy Land, that's going to have enormous implications for all of us. So let us keep watching these developments very carefully, because once the Holy Land is formally divided, nothing will ever be the same again. This is by Michael Snyder. He says, about the author, my name is Michael, and my brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters, commissions earned. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I've also started a brand new Substack newsletter, and I encourage you to subscribe so that you won't miss any of my articles. I have published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the most important news. And the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media on Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. This is by Michael Snyder on End of the American Dream. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.